Mr. Rops here, and for this particular video, we're going to talk about solving equations, quadratic equations, which means there's an x squared here. And when we solve quadratic equations, the first thing we always have to do, step one, is set one side of the equation equal to 0. And for this problem, it's already set like that. The second scenario is, this is assuming we do not have any technology. So we're going to assume there is no GDC available to us. No calculators, no computers, nothing. We have to do it without the calculator. So the second step is we're going to consider if it can be factored. If it can be factored, we can answer by the magic question, a common factor, or differences of squares. There are other techniques as well, but we're going to concentrate on these ones. Now, I know that this kind here is the magic question kind, and this is the magic question. If you're given this quadratic, if a equals 1, that means this front term is 1, so it is 1 here because it's not written. The magic question is, what two numbers multiply to get c and combine to get b? So multiply to get c and combine by adding and subtracting to get b. You have to know this question. You have to be able to ask it to yourself. Know it, love it, breathe it, sleep it, eat it. Everything you must do. So once you know the question, and then you actually have to answer the question. And what two numbers multiply to get negative 15? Well, that's going to be 5 and 3. One of them's got to be negative. And to add to get b, that means I'm going to have a positive 5 and a negative 3. And it's x and x. This magic question is really important. You got to make sure you remember that one. The next step is use the null factor law to split the two factors into two equations. Well, at this point here, I've taken this equation which has an equal sign, and I've erroneously, that means mistakenly, forgot to keep the 0 here. Good learning moment. I have to keep the 0. Without it, then it's just an expression. Now it stays as an equation. And use the null factor law, I can break it up in two parts. I can say x plus 5 equals 0, or x minus 3 equals 0, because this number here times this entire number here equals 0. So one of them must be 0. It's either this one or, which I just wrote, x minus 3. And then the final step of the equation, the final step is simply to solve each equation. So then I just subtract 5, so x equals minus 5. Add 3, x equals 3. So, and it has two answers. That is very common. If you have an x squared, expect two answers. So to recap, one side is equal to 0, which was already true. Factor, by asking the magic question. What two numbers multiply to get negative 15? Add to get positive 2. Split up the equations, solve each individually. Let's try another example. This one here, I already got my step 2, but I need to make sure I think about step 1. Set one side of the equation equal to 0. That's not the case here, so let's rewrite it by subtracting 8x from both sides. So I have 3x squared minus 8x equal to 0. Don't forget the equal to 0, that's the whole key. And then I'm going to factor it. Not by the magic question this time, because it's not, there's no c value. This is a common factor kind because there's two terms and there's no constant at the end here. And so the common factor, what's common between 3x squared and negative 8x? Well, common is an x, which leaves me with a 3x minus 8 equal to 0. Keep the equal to 0 part. Now, with the null factor, I'm going to split up in two equations, and then I will solve each equation. This x is one of my factors, so it's x is equal to 0, or 3x minus 8 equals 0. Add my 8, divide then by 3, and x is equal to 8 over 3. And so here is another scenario that is true. We have a common factor type of factoring. So you have to make sure you factor correctly, which is a review from before, and then solve the equations with these 4 steps.